Well, hello everyone, and thanks for joining us for this exciting series we're calling Automation Week. We'll be spending 3 hours, 1 hour today, tomorrow, and the next to talk robot schedule basic training as well as tips and techniques from the real world. These sessions will be recorded and available for you to review and share as you see fit. My name is Chuck Lisinski, Director of Technical Solutions here at Help Systems, and I'm joined today by Mr. Tom Huntington and Mark Amaker, both longtime IBMI experts. And Mark has many years in the real world managing IBMI. I'm going to let each of these guys introduce themselves. Tom Huntington.
Oh, you threw me a curveball there. I thought I was going to go last, but that's okay. At Tom Huntington, Executive Vice President of Technical Solutions at Help Systems, rather long title. Working on my 34th year here, shortly at the end of June with Help Systems. And by the way, Chuck, it's our 40th anniversary at Help Systems too. So really exciting year. Hard to believe it's gone by that quickly over the years, but robot schedule, which we're talking about this week, started it all. Also, in my resume, I'm also an IBM Power Champion. So excited to be here. Got a new OS level this year with 7.5. And I think the final rollout of Power 10, we'll see that here yet this summer, yet to be delivered. So very exciting times on the IBMI platform.
Awesome, and we'll talk a little bit more about what's coming up on the agenda for IBMI as we go through the next couple of days. Mark Amaker, good morning.
Good morning. I'm Mark Amaker. I'm the lead technical consultant at Help Systems. I've been with Help Systems about 5 years. But before that, I was on the other side of the phone as a customer for probably 20 plus years. So happy to be on the team.
Yep, and I had the opportunity to work with Mark as a customer. It was a great pleasure. And so Mark is going to bring some real life experiences to the equation here as we walk through our 3 sections: basics, operations, and advanced tips. So we've built this webinar to be as much of a training session as possible in the time that we're given. So we've got 3 hours. You'll no doubt have lots of questions and possibly even some follow-ups. So please feel free to reach out to us with any questions you might have. And also, I'd suggest that if you have the robot schedule GUI interface installed, follow along with our examples best you can. We're going to have a lot of live demo over the next 3 days. And some of this material is going to take a little soak time and practice and might even require some one-on-one time with somebody like Mark Amaker in professional services. And you'll have the opportunity to request that assistance at the end of each session. So gents, let's get this rolling. Here's what our agenda looks like today. We're going to just talk about what is robot schedule and the components of robot schedule. So we're going to dive into the features a little bit. We're going to talk about the DNA of a job. What are all the pieces and parts that make up a robot job that ultimately gets scheduled onto IBMI or ran on IBMI? Tom's going to take us through schedule overrides, critical feature of the product. And any good scheduling tool is dependency processing. So we're going to look at the ins and outs of that. And then Mark's going to take us through calendars, data objects, and what we call job environments. Mark, let's talk about what is robot schedule.
Sure. Robot schedule. It's the premier job scheduler, batch job scheduler on the IBMI. We've been doing it for like 40 plus years. It's our first product. We've got a lot of experience in it, and it's very important to us. What it isn't, it's not a performance tuner. It's not a message monitor and QSys hopper. It's not a reporting tool. However, we do have tools that handle all of that stuff. Why is it better than the IBM Job Scheduler? It's better because it has a nice GUI. It offers reactivity, calendars, better reporting, and I said reactivity already. It's got an awesome schedule activity monitor, which you can view your jobs that have happened already during the day, the ones that are running now, and the ones that are coming up. And yeah, it's just a better tool than the standard IBM scheduler.
And Mark, you use that in the real world, right?
Absolutely.
Robots. Yeah.
I love
Okay.
the schedule activity monitor. We used to put that on a big monitor in the data center, and everybody could see what was happening and what was going to happen throughout the day. This slide, IT operations management, talks about help systems complete workload automation software products for the AS400 power systems and System I. Yep, stay on that one for a second. Used together, all these tools provide a complete package for our customers in automation and helping create sort of a lights out type environment.
And Mark, I know you're
Next
doing a lot of
slide.
work in the HA business too, aren't you?
Yeah, HA is very important. We have a very competitive product called Robot HA that came out about 5 years ago. That product is really taking off for us. We are very competitive in the marketplace against products like Mimix and Maxava. And generally we're a lot cheaper. But with Robot HA, you get our same support that people tend to love with the Minnesota Nice on the other side of the phone. All right, on this slide, automated job scheduling. Robot schedule works with the IBM I, obviously, but it also interfaces with E1 and SAP interfaces. We have part of Robot schedule that has Robot replay, which automates some interactive type functions. So if you have a person that does repetitive work going through a menu system, Robot replay can automate that workload. And then we also have Robot Schedule Enterprise, and Robot Schedule Enterprise allows you to have your schedule on the IBM I, but also schedule in the other systems, the Windows systems, the Linux systems, things like that. We can run workloads on those systems using our schedule. So that's for the folks that want to keep their main production schedule on the IBM I, but then also have it submitting workload out on to those other systems. All right, next slide.
Cool. All right. Well, let's talk about the components. What are the pieces and parts of Robot Schedule that you will see running on IBM I, and for that matter, externally when we get into the enterprise component? So first of all, libraries. The primary Robot Schedule library is called Robot Lib. There's also a library called RBT Merge Lib that's used for moving jobs between systems. And likewise, RBT SysLib, which contains some system components that are common throughout all of our other products. In order for Robot Schedule to be up and running and active and submitting jobs and monitoring jobs that are running out there and so forth, the RBT Sleeper subsystem has to be active. You've no doubt seen that. And then within the Robot Sleeper subsystem, you will see multiple jobs with a prefix of robot, R-O-B-O-T, and those are the jobs that will be doing the submitting, that will be reacting to jobs as they complete, will be auditing the processes as they happen, and so forth. Also, when robot is installed, there will be some user profiles created, and those are the user profiles that are the object owners and administrators of the product when changes happen. All right, as far as the interface goes, of course, we started with the green screen interface many years ago and have put a lot of time and effort into that. And many of our customers are very happy using the green screen interface. However, it was, Tom, I think it was at least 17 years ago now, we came out with our new Java interface. And that is where we've been putting all our time and energies and enhancements into. Mark, for instance, mentioned something called the Schedule Activity Monitor that only exists in the GUI interface, right, Tom?
That is true. It's a very handy tool, and you are probably a good guesstimate on 17 years.
Yeah. And we also have a web browser interface that's an operator type interface for robot schedule. You can look at the schedule activity monitor. You can override jobs and look at completion history. You read job logs and so forth from your mobile device, from a web interface, wherever it happens to exist.
You know, the other thing on that one, Chuck, is that I know people have developers maybe that they don't want changing the schedule or adding jobs, but they want to give them access. That's really more of a read-only access or view-only, so very helpful for them. So while we,
Beautiful.
yeah, let me launch up our first polling question here. What's your experience with robot schedule? And select all that apply. Okay, I have no experience. I'm finding my way and know the basics. I'm proficient. Wow. What about you, Chuck? My experience, believe it or not, you won't believe this, Chuck, but I was actually a user of what was called Robot back on the System 38 days. And I basically ran my System 38 environment totally lights out
Wow.
with Robot Schedule. My
Well, and
backups, everything.
yeah, and it still amazes me even today how people are still running systems, IBM systems, off of a spreadsheet or a run book, and we see it
Yeah.
again and again and again.
Or
But I'm
they
glad to,
have even own Robot Schedule and they haven't used it to its, you know,
right?
what it's made for. You know, people will say, "Oh, I'm afraid to put stuff in robot schedule, then I'll be dependent on it." And I've heard that over the years. I'm like, "Why'd you
Yeah,
buy it? You know,
or
why'd you
like
buy it?"
not setting up dependency processing or something like
Yeah,
that. Yeah.
yeah. All right.
Wow.
Well,
Look
let's
at
close this
yeah.
first poll and share our
Let's
results here. All right. So almost 30% have no experience. And then nearly 60% are saying, they can find their way around. They know the basics. I'm going to guess, probably know how to use the green screen version. And then we have 13% that are proficient. Oh, there'll be a test for you guys later then. You think
haha.
that?
No, that is really awesome feedback. I'm super
Yeah,
excited that we've got a bunch of folks here that are ready to do some learning, so to speak.
yeah,
All
great.
right. Well,
DNA of the job. I think that's me, Chuck. So let's talk about creating a new job. You know, across the GUI, we're in the GUI. So obviously you can press in the green screen. If you are using green screen, you're probably pressing F6 to add a job. In the GUI, across the top, we have the toolbar. We have a couple different options. Probably the biggest problem with Robot Schedule, there's more than one way to do things. And same with adding jobs. You have the wizard that allows you to walk your way through creating jobs, which is just kind of an easy way of getting started. And notice we have different types of jobs. We also have, I'm sorry, I should say, we also have Robot Guide. We also can still press F6 in the GUI if you want. And then you also can do a right click to create a new job. But the wizard's the easiest way to go. And there's also filters there. I should point that out in the GUI. Another reason for using the GUI is filters. We'll talk about that, I think, in the operational section this week. But notice we have different types of jobs. We have a command job, program job, group job, and agent job, okay? Command job is the most common. Probably 95% of your jobs are going to be command jobs. Basically what that's saying is I'm creating a job and it's going to call a command, or what a lot of people talk about today, a script, right? So we're going to do an interactive command there. Programs are basically a holdover from the System 38 days. If you have any of those are jobs that have been running in your schedule since then. It basically says the name of the job is the program that I'm going to call. Group jobs, we'll talk about that. Chuck mentioned dependencies, and group jobs are a way of doing dependencies, and they allow you to have kind of single threaded or a way of having all your jobs submitted at once. It allows you to have one schedule and then maybe 50, 100 jobs all in a group if you want. They're going to run things like your daily backup group or your end of day or your end of week. And we'll talk some more about groups in a bit. And then agents deal with Robot Schedule Enterprise. So in the same place you put an IBM command, if it's an agent job, you can call a Windows BAT, a SQL Server SSIS package, gives you a capability. We know that you have more than just IBM today. We have to have Windows, Unix, and Linux. And then over to the right, we have our scheduling features. Oh, yeah, go ahead. Go to the next slide. And we'll see a couple things here as we create our new job. We give it a name and we have a description. We also have a notes, and then we also have a job text editor all built in there for adding information. And then about the job, and then we have a thing called application. Application is a way of being able to sort your jobs into logical groups. Like here we have accounting, you could have sales, you could have ERP, invoicing run. That way you can actually hold an entire application, you can copy an entire application, just a way of sorting and maintaining many jobs. Also notice we work with the LDA here on this panel, so there's quite a few things going on. You got to kind of look around. Then we go off to the right, we get into the scheduling. We click on the scheduling tab across the top. And of course, Robot Schedule can run jobs weekly, monthly, last Friday of the month, first Friday of the month, second Tuesday of the month. We have incremental days. We have multiple times of the day that you can run things, different days of the week. Interval-oriented jobs that we call every, which basically you can say run something every 5 minutes between 8 a.m. and 4 p.m. if you wanted to, on Tuesdays only. Date objects for specific dates. We'll talk a little bit about those today. And then day number. Day number happens to be, from an advanced scheduling standpoint, one of my favorite features, because you can do things like run this job on +1, +5, -5, based on a fiscal or standard calendar. So very flexible. Okay. Yeah, somebody's asking about asking questions. If you want to ask any questions as we go, just simply use the question toolbar and you can put your questions in there. Now, what Chuck's showing us now here is application. And notice we clicked on the application accounting. From here, if I right click on accounting, I could actually hold the entire group. I also could export. So for those who are maybe doing a Q&A on one box and then moving them to productions, it's a way to import export jobs either through the GUI, through XML, or you can use the merge library that Chuck talked about earlier. So that's applications, very handy feature. You can have many, you can call them whatever you want. You're limited to, I believe, 10 characters on that too. Then we get off to the actual, what are we going to run? As I said, most of your jobs are going to be command jobs, and here we're entering a command entry. You can just simply put whatever command you want. Here we're calling a program. It looks like an invoice program. Then we're just doing a delay job, just showing you that you can use commands like work active job, work status, change job, delay job. You can put comments in here if you want to. Once you've added a very complicated command, you can use the command finder to go out and find other commands and reuse them, and then change the parameters on them for this job. You have the add function, and then add nested job, again, is a very old feature, back from the system 38 days, and no reason to dwell on that. So commands, if we move to the next screen, also we can prompt in here. So the GUI is very good at prompting. Just press F4, prompt it, put your parameters in here. There's also, again, the finder feature. We press the command finder, and now I can see all previous commands that I have in the scheduler already. So if you have something really complicated, I can just choose it and it'll bring it right back to the screen. Notice we have 10, we have 2 commands out there right now. Notice there's also a column called cancel on air, or on air, what you want to do. So you can kind of like do a global mon message here if you want. Okay, moving on to the next panel. Then we get into reserved command variables. You might wonder what that @ sign stands for. And the @ sign is the way that robot schedule can feed in dynamic parameters. We ship the product with probably about 20 reserved command variables built into them. And then we give you some example programs actually documented in the user guide or documented online. And you can create your own reserved command variable. So you could do things like your next invoice number, your next cash draft number. In this case here, you'll see things like today's date -1, today's date +7, system date format, your month date format, just depending upon how you're passing parameters. And you can use multiple reserved command variables on one single program if you want. So very, very powerful feature. All right, and they're global. Reserve command variables are global to the other jobs on robot schedule. So I like the word global because that means I can reuse something over and over again. So next, moving on, is output. Robot schedule does allow you to control your output, what job queue you want, how many copies, some of the older things like print text, etc. There's a feature called job dates that we can override on the product. We also have report distribution, which is really the ability for robot schedule rather, to duplicate spool files off to multiple output queues. We also have integration to robot reports in here too. So if somebody has robot reports, there's a direct integration for that. And the reason you might do that is to control, you know, basically archiving of spool files on the system. We've had people doing that for years. All right, off to the next slide. Enough on output is going to be your, oh, I guess we do have more on the output here showing the report distribution. I got ahead of myself a little bit. But with report distribution, you can have banner pages and multiple different recipients getting the different copies of that spool file, but it's a full duplication of the original report that's being generated by this job, okay? Work management or control options are very important. This is, where's my job going to run? What authority is it going to run under? What job description? My priorities, my initial library list, what robot alert device I might use, what calendars. There's things like historical runs where you can control the number of runs of a job, job queue, user profile, as I said earlier. And then we have a thing called environments. If you happen to be let's just say you're a company that hosts multiple banks on the same IBMI system and you want to build out basically a very similar schedule. You could have in here bank 1, bank 2, bank 3 as the environment, and then robot schedule will share those job environments across those jobs. So it's a good way or an easy way to have your work management parameters passed in to your job. And that's what that stands for. And anywhere you see star robot default, it's defaulting to the job environment or the system setup inside your robot schedule job. And there's also a show defaults option down at the bottom, and that'll show you what the job's actually going to run with when it actually runs. So pretty cool little feature. All right, moving on to the next slide here. Talking about job monitors, we have built into robot schedule the job overrun, job underrun, late start. This is to help pinpoint if a job is not running and not going to meet your SLAs. There is also a command associated with this kind of functionality called jobs, run jobs, or I'm sorry, it's forecast jobs missed rather. There's a command inside of robot schedule, newer, probably 4 or 5 years old, that will also help with this area. But our whole goal here with job monitors was to notify you if a job is not going to start on time, or it's going to run too quick, or it overran, and then use various mechanisms to notify you, like QSysOp or Robot Alert, Robot Network. Okay. And then there's also some reporting and stuff on job monitors. So if we move on to the next, and then we're going to just touch on group jobs here, and we'll come back to it. So another type of job you can create when you get started is a group. Here, Chuck has his nightly group, and in it he has jobs that are going to run. These group jobs can have dependencies. Notice he has a file dependency, an agent dependency, a robot job dependency, and another file dependency coming in from IBMI. So 3 file dependencies and a robot job are going to cause this entire group of his to run. So very purpose behind groups, again, is I want to bring together multiple processes that are all dependent on each other, and they're going to be either serial, or I'm going to shoot them all off at once on the system and make them multi-threaded. Okay. And I think that's the last on the DNA of a job. Chuck, I think you have a live demo, and how are we doing on time?
I think we're doing good. I'm going to dive into the live demo. And let me bring up the right screen. Ha! See my robot schedule?
I do.
Okay. Okay, so Tom talked about adding jobs into robot schedule. A couple ways we can do that. I'm going to show you the guided way, but first of all, I'll just show you where you can right click and say new. I want to add a new job. And I'm sure there's a lot of people out there who might find a current job and do something like a copy. So there's good and bad behind that. You know, you don't know exactly what you're getting when you copy. So if you create new, you're starting from scratch. Otherwise, on the title bar, there are two options. It says easily create a robot schedule job, and then we have robot guide. So this is called our wizard. Tom showed you this as part of the presentation. And so first of all, you select the type of job that you want to create. And then it says, what do you want to call this? So we're going to call this Automation Week 1, Automation Week, extra E, no charge for the extra E. All right, and then it says, well, what application do you want to use when you create this job? Tom mentioned that we do have some predefined applications, and we're going to talk more about that, but the application determines where a job runs, what user it runs with, what job description it uses, and so forth. And we're going to use this one called Auto Week. All right, next. So in other words, we're just walking through all the steps, all the screens that Tom showed you in the components of a robot job. So we're going to run this weekly. We're going to run this Monday through Friday, something simple. We're going to run it at 1,800 hours. So when you schedule a robot job, it is military time. You can schedule it to run multiple times during the day or night. So that's an advantage over the native scheduler. And let's just fast forward here a little bit. We're going to use what's called an exclusive command set. And that just means we're going to put the commands into our robot job. So let's just do something like a delay job, 10 seconds. All right. Otherwise, we could use the command finder button, and it shows us all the other commands out there and all our other robot jobs. Next again, and it gives us a little summary. Job name is called Auto Week. All right. And the application is called Auto Week. All right. So jobs properties. Let's go ahead and do that. All right. There's Auto Week 1. It captured our description. Of course, you can add more information by clicking on the job text button. And here is where you could document, for instance, when you created the job, why you created it, what are the rerun procedures, changes to the job over time. You can add notes. Our scheduling option shows us that we're going to run this Monday through Friday. Command entry, Tom mentioned you can use the F4 key to prompt, or you can use the prompt button. And likewise here on the control options panel, we're just going to use our standard environment, and we can look at those options that will populate the robot default parameters by clicking on the show defaults button. All right, the last thing I'm going to show you is that we created this under our Auto Week application. So here is one of the sorts that is available. It's by application. And I just clicked on Auto Week and it shows us the one job that we have out there so far as part of our live demo. And of course, we could right click and we could copy that and create more jobs. Okay, let's jump into scheduling objects. We're going to talk about calendars, date objects, and Mark Amaker's favorite topic, job environments.
Yeah, and Chuck just talked about environments a little bit, in the previous slides. But yeah, we'll focus on calendars and data objects and then go into environments. All right, so calendars. So calendars are, like it says, a calendar is like a year's worth of dates, and then actually a calendar goes off into the future. But it's for scheduling your holidays and things like that. So you also can schedule your work weeks in the calendar if it's just a Monday through Friday work week. But then also you would put in any of your holidays. You can have multiple calendars. So if you have different businesses that would use a different calendar, maybe there's a maybe you're multinational on your system, on your single LPAR. You could have a calendar for each of the countries that you work with. So, and then you can have your job look at that specific calendar. All right. Simply, you turn on and turn off the days by just selecting one of the days and double clicking on it, and it would turn it on and turn it off. The beauty about a calendar is there's a little arrow to the right and a little arrow to the left. You can go forward and backwards in years. Going forward, this isn't a live demo on the calendar piece, but it's very important that I find that you at least do January 1st of the next year so that doesn't get forgot about, because a lot of times that is a holiday, and if you don't remember to do it, you come in on the 2nd and things didn't work as you desired. So you can, like I said, you can go out multiple years in advance. I think it's 20 plus years in advance, and put in your holidays into your calendars if you would like.
Mark,
also on the screen, like I said, you can go ahead.
I was just going to say, Mark, I was thinking about the holidays, and you mentioned January 1st, and I was thinking about how many people go out there, for instance, to the native scheduler every holiday, and they put jobs on hold because they have no way to associate a calendar with the native scheduler, and then they have to take them off of hold. So one of the big advantages of calendars.
Right. And here's another one that you have highlighted down on the bottom. You can have a job skip the holiday altogether. You can also have robot schedule run the job before the holiday. So if July 4th, you have a job that's scheduled to run on July 4th, but you don't want to run it on that day, you can run it on the day before or the day after. And it's a simple button that says run before or run after. So very handy. And like I said, you can have multiple calendars on your system. There's a standard calendar or a standard environment that uses the standard calendar, but you can create many different ones, and you just give it a different calendar name, and that creates a different object. The second type of calendar type object we have is called a date object. Now, date objects, I would recommend don't overuse this. This is more or less for setting a date where you don't want a job to run, or you just want it to run one time. So a lot of times where the data objects come into play is if you have major system maintenance coming up, and you say, hey, I want to run this on this day only. Maybe it's reorgs or something, and you would say, hey, use this data object calendar, and you set up all the work, and then it would just run on that Saturday or whenever. It's important not to try to use date objects in replacement of a calendar object. A lot of times it'll do the same things, but you'll notice the little black arrows aren't on this date object screen. So you can only do a 12-month period. Now you can start the period whenever you want to, but you can only do, a 12-month block. So very important to know. But again, I recommend don't overuse the data objects. You're just going to use it for the one-time runtime or the one-time exception that you don't want something to run. Okay. And the screen is showing you where you put that calendar name in down there. All right. The next thing is, sorry about that. The next thing is job environments. So every system comes with a standard job environment. And a lot of folks will just use that one environment for everything. But you can have multiple job environments too. So again, when you are running, if you're running out like a multinational environment, or if you have several different disparate businesses on the same system, you could have a different job environment that runs the workload for that. And the job environment is important because it carries many different things like job description, message queue, job queue, library list, user profile. That's probably the most popular one. What user profile do you want it to run under? And you can set that stuff up ahead of time so your jobs always run that way. Also, job control has some other features within that. An important thing to note when you are setting up your job and you set your environment up in a job, you can have it show the defaults for that environment in the individual job, and you can override what the environment is in the individual job. So you can go outside of what your standard environment is or the environment you chose for that. I
Awesome.
think that's all I have
Thanks,
for
Mark.
that.
Yep. And let's turn it over to Tom for schedule overrides.
Right. What's the idea behind schedule overrides? Basically, the idea is that I want to impact the schedule, put something on hold, change when it's going to run, force something to run right now, skip it the next time it's going to run with the omit feature, or run it the next time that it's up. There are also overrides. So that's just at the job level. You can also do overrides at the member level within a group of jobs. So schedule overrides, obviously we're showing you it here interactively through the GUI. It can be done through the green screen. There are also commands like robot batch update and auto run that allow you to impact the job itself, and actually even through Opal. There's a feature called Opal inside of Robot Schedule too. One of the things to keep in mind too is that when you do that activity, it is actually logged and audited too. So let's move on to the next screen here and take a look at some other things dealing with schedule overrides. And on this screen here, basically we're showing you that if you force a job to run, you want to do it right now. When you do that, we're going to show you the job history if you want. If you check the box, we'll show you the completion history within Robot Schedule, where you can then drill into job logs or history logs. Maybe you're having problems with something that's failing, you're just not getting it right, and you want to just go right in and retest that job. Now we also have the things are tracked, like I said earlier, in the audit trail. You do need to consider whether or not you want your reactivity to occur. So down on the bottom, we have some special override options. One with Opal and the other without reactivity, and also do and set a schedule runtime so you can actually force an actual time of when you want it to start. So obviously with hold, you can hold an individual job, a group of jobs, you can hold an entire application, as I said earlier. And omit is basically going to omit this job the next time that it's scheduled to run. There's also a release job, release application, and again, everything is tracked in the audit history. So probably enough said on schedule overrides. I guess Chuck, you can do a little live demo and just keeping
Let's
our
do
time in
that.
order too.
You
Here,
bet. You bet.
I can see your
Okay.
screen.
Oh, awesome. Thank you. Okay, so
Mhm.
Mark was talking about scheduling objects and specifically around calendars and data objects and environments. So here are a list of calendars that I have, and my most recent calendar is our 2022 holiday calendar. So basically, if this calendar is used on any robot job specifically, or if you specified it in a job environment and that job environment is used on a job, if the job goes to run on one of these dates, then the job will simply not run. And I have an example of that we'll show you, but I was just gonna right click on here and show you that there is a where used. All right, so I've got this this calendar specifically defined on 4 different jobs, and I also have it in a job environment. All right, so there are 2 tabs here when you do a where used. All right, and so one of those jobs was a group job that I have called CL Nightly. So let's go into the properties of the job just to show you where it's defined at the group level. All right, going to the control options on my job, you'll see that I specifically have the calendar defined on this job. I really didn't need to do that. I could have simply said robot default as the calendar name, because I also have the calendar listed here, I believe, on my job environments. Let's click on job environments, and you'll see that my calendar is defined there, along with all the other work management properties that I want to have associated with this particular job. All right. And Tom also mentioned some overrides. So I'm going to right click, schedule override. You can see we have the do job now and the hold. All right, so let's just do a do job now. I won't actually run it. I'm just going to show you the options. So for instance, if this job triggered downstream activity, I could say, no, do without reactivity. Don't let the jobs that run after this run. Just run this one job. Or if you knew that there was some type of opal associated with it, you could do that. And likewise, do and set to run at scheduled time. If you run a job now, it considers it to be, the robot considers that job to be done for the day. If it's supposed to run at 6 o'clock tonight, it won't. If you want to run it now and you want it to run at its normal scheduled time, you would say do and set to run at scheduled time. So there's a couple tips around calendars and environments that you can take home with you. Let's move on to dependencies, and we're going to talk about reactive jobs now. So we're going to say one job needs to run and complete normally, let's say, before the next job runs. So what type of dependencies can we have? We can have a robot job as a prerequisite to one of my other jobs. We can have a group job that contains multiple individual jobs. We can have what's called a remote job. In other words, I've got a job on another system that's going to trigger my downstream activity on my local system. I can have user jobs, which basically amounts to a user submitted job. We can also have events. We've got a couple kind of events. We've got agent events, and then we have native file events. So if somebody drops a file into an IFS directory, that can trigger the reactivity or dependency processing in robot schedule. So how do you set up dependency processing? It's quite simple. When you open up the properties of your robot job in the GUI, there is a reactive tab, a reactivity tab, and it's there where you select the type of dependency that you want to react to, whether it's a local robot job, a remote robot job, something called a user job, which would ultimately be a user submitted job or a flag set through a CL program. And then we have agent event. So an agent event is a file event that happens off in the Windows Linux world. And then we have a local event. So a local file event in the IFS or in the library member structure. And you can have multiple dependencies. Right, so as far as remote jobs go, that requires robot network. You'll see your list of systems, and from there you can select the job on that other system that's going to trigger your local job. So we're talking about cross-partition dependencies. That's a remote job dependency.
IBM partitions,
Yes,
right?
thank you.
If there was
Yep.
Linux or AIX or a Windows server, then you're talking Robot Schedule Enterprise.
Exactly. Yep. And then we also have something called user job dependencies. A user job dependency is a job triggered from outside robot schedule. It can either be a flag that you set with the send robot data command. Otherwise, we can also track user submitted jobs by using the RBT INS SBM to turn off user submitted job tracking. You may just want to track the history of all the jobs running on your system inside a robot schedule. That's something we can do with that user job tracking feature. You don't have to use it for dependencies or user job dependencies in robot schedule. And then we also have agent jobs that can trigger your IBM job. So in this case, it could be a task or a script running out in the Windows world that will then trigger your local IBM batch job. All right. So that's what we call reactivity. Then there is something called group jobs. And group jobs are a special entity within Robot Schedule. You will never see a group job name actually running on IBMI, but all the members that are part of that group you will see running. And the group job entity in Robot Schedule is what's going to control the flow of your individual jobs in Robot. So we have a special filter in the GUI for group jobs. You can see here's one called CL Nightly. And in my CL Nightly group, I can have dependencies for that group. So I've got multiple dependencies for the group prior to it running. The parameters of the group jobs say we've got two options. We've got what are called group control options and group processing. The group control options can do things like look at the control options on the group, and that will then apply to all the individual members in the group. We can also manipulate the start date, but more importantly, it's the group processing. So there are two options: submit all jobs immediately or submit jobs one at a time, stopping if one job fails. If you choose submit all jobs immediately, that means all the jobs that are in your group, however many there are, they're all going to be submitted in the order that they're listed to their respective job queues. And then the job queues control the order in which they run, if it's single-threaded or multi-threaded. More typically, though, we see customers using group jobs in a single-threaded fashion. Submit jobs one at a time, stopping if one job fails. So for instance, I have 4 jobs that are group members in my nightly processing. I have selected to submit one job at a time. So first it's going to run my set proc date, and then it's going to run my order detail job, and then my good morning job, and then my SQL server job. What makes these
Chuck,
group...
and
Yeah, go ahead.
one of the big differences when you talk about submitting one job at a time, people who don't have Robot Schedule might have like a single threaded job queue where they submit everything out there and just hold it and then release it all at once. The problem with that is once you release it, everything's going to start running. And if there's any problems with any of those jobs, now you got kind of a mess on your hand. With Robot
Yeah.
Schedule, we're not going to submit the next job until the previous one has finished successfully. So it's much easier to restart and not have problems with things that get hung up during night processing.
Yeah, exactly. Yep. So when you create a group job, you'll go to the group members tab. You will add the individual robot jobs that will be running as part of your group. You can qualify jobs as they run. For instance, let's say my SQL server process here is having some issues. I can override that job inside the group so it just doesn't run, but the group continues to run normally. And Tom's going to take us through the Opal processing in another section, but I have an Opal here called Skip Wednesday. So it checks to see if this group might run Monday through Friday, but if it's Wednesday, we're going to skip the order detail report because it's not necessary. All right. Okay, as far as other types of dependencies and setting those up, we're going to look at this more in the advanced section, but in this case, we've got an event monitor set up called CL orders, transfer orders file. So what we're doing is we're waiting for a file to be placed in the integrated file system. That's called orders. We're using a wildcard. Robot's going to go out and check that, and we're going to check that every 5 seconds, and that can likewise then be a prerequisite for my robot jobs. All right, I get the last demo of the day, guys. So let's jump into
And we
that.
got quite a few questions out there too, Chuck. So
okay, we're going to leave a good solid 7 minutes for questions. So first of all, let's navigate around my jobs a little bit. I'm going to look at my accounting jobs. All right, so this is my filter that will give me a subset of my jobs, and we're going to look at CL job 1. All right, the properties of CL job 1 show that it has a prerequisite. All right, so I'm going to go over here to the reactivity tab, and it says, well, look at that, my nightly group job is a prerequisite, and the job can complete either normally or abnormally. The prerequisite can complete normally or normally in order trigger the next job in line. All right, so let's look at my nightly process, my CL nightly group job now. And a couple things. First of all, this job is set up to be single threaded, submit jobs one at a time, stopping if one job fails. All right, this job is not scheduled to run discretely. It has prerequisites. All right, and I have 4 prerequisites. I have multiple types of events, agent events, robot jobs, etc. And I have or conjunctions between them all. So any one of these can trigger my nightly process because it's a demo. Typically you'd have and conjunctions between those. And then likewise, I have 4 jobs that are part of this group. All right, and if I want to add other jobs, either local, I click on the add button and you will see all my local robot jobs. I can also click on the add remote job and it actually add a job from another system as long as robot network is in place. I've qualified my SQL Server job to be on hold, and likewise, I've got my good morning process set to skip if it's Tuesday. So just to go a little further, we could run this process right now. All right, and I'll go ahead and say okay. All right, and then we're going to go to the schedule activity monitor, which I don't have up, so I'm going to click on. This is a little preview of the schedule activity monitor, and the schedule activity monitor is something we're going to talk about in the operations section. All right, and it is showing that our CL nightly process is done. It ran the order detail report and set proc date. And now it's actually running some downstream activity. CL job 1, for instance, was dependent on my CL nightly process. And then of course, we've got another downstream job that's waiting. Now, we can show all this dependency processing in what we call a job blueprint or job flow diagram, but we're gonna show that in the operations section tomorrow. All right, Tom?
Great tips.
Let's go to questions.
And
yeah.
also remind people what Help Systems does. We're, security and automation companies. So anything security, anything automation, IBM, Windows, Unix, or Linux, we can help you out. It's not just IBM anymore, guys. We love IBM or AS400, as many people say. We do enterprise scheduling. Matter of fact, we had some questions too about our robotic process automation tool, Automate, and what's different between robot and Automate. So that's a great Q&A question right there, Chuck. Maybe you want to hit that question right off the top. And what's different between Automate and, say, Robot Schedule?
Sure. Well, tell you what, Tom, let's launch our polling question.
There you go. Let's launch our, how can Help Systems help you? And let me bring that up while we do Q&A.
Okay.
Sorry, I got to bring up that question too. And here we go. We'll leave that open in the background while we answer some questions. But
yeah,
a couple things that we can do is I want to learn more about Robot Schedule. I had somebody out there that just wants to see green screen. And, certainly if you want, one of us could kind of walk you around the green screen if you want. We show GUI because it's 2022 and that's what most people want to see their team using these days. So somebody wants a robot schedule demo, we'll do that. A health check. What's a health check, Chuck? What do you do on those?
So with a robot health check, what we do is we do a one-on-one session with you, and we look to see if you're purging. We're looking to see if you're using all the features of the product. We're looking to see if you can tighten things up in your robot schedule to make sure it's working at its optimum performance.
Yeah, and this should be a select all that applies. So I guess we got to please select one. I'll have to talk to our marketing team on that. I'd like to schedule a tech update conversation. What that is we'll walk you through everything Help Systems, talk about the products you own. It's a good education session for your manager and your team. We do a lot of those throughout the year. And then the last thing we have is a free security scan. We know security is number one thing on everybody's mind these days. Our free security scan in a matter of minutes, like 2 or 3 minutes, we'll run a scan and we'll be able to show you what your vulnerabilities are on IBM. Okay, So go ahead and check what you want there. Another Q&A question. I talked about the green screen already. You showed a few things already that are different between the GUI and the green screen. So I can think of the blueprint where we can show you the flow chart. I can think of SAM, the schedule activity monitor. If you want to do file monitoring on IBMI of the IFS files or libraries, those are three things right off the top of my head that are only in the GUI. Chuck, any other? Oh, filters. Filters are another one, Chuck, right? Where you can filter by job name, by many different ways. So that's a
Yep.
very good one. Did we talk, what's the difference
Hey,
between
Tom,
automate and, go ahead. Yeah. Go ahead, Mark.
could I add something to that? Just
Yeah.
so the new people know, Robot GUI is free. Not only is it free, but you can run it at the same time you're using the green screen. So it's not a either or type of activity. So I highly recommend using it because it is free.
Yeah, so that's a great point, Mark. We'll have people that will add jobs in the green screen, but then they'll use schedule activity monitor and blueprint and a few other things.
Okay,
I'll do the comparison. So Dan,
go
go
for it.
ahead.
I was just going to say we had a question in that what criteria does Robot use to determine if a job completed normally? I believe if you look at the end of your job log, there's an end code, and if the end code is 20 or less, we consider the job to be completed normally. Todd?
Yeah. Typically, where you're looking for an escape message from your job at the end. Somebody's asking if the sessions are recorded. Quick question. Yes, we have recorded it. We'll record all three. You'll be able to share them, play them back, go over to your neighbors, sit out on the deck and watch them over and over again if you want here. Okay, just kidding. So Automate. Automate's our robotic process automation tool. Automate runs from Windows. So one of the biggest differences between Automate and Robot Schedule is Automate only runs on a Windows server. Now it can talk and do telnet sessions, and it can run GUIs and it can run browsers, but what it doesn't do is it doesn't necessarily understand it doesn't understand batch activity on IBMI. So on IBMI Robot Schedule, we have a hook on every well, not necessarily. Optionally, we can put a hook on every job that's submitted on the system, whether it's started by Robot Schedule or not, and then we can do dependency processing based on those batch activities. So it gives you a lot of flexibility underneath the cover. Automate allows you to build scripts, almost like CL programming for the Windows world that we have on IBMI. And a combination of the two is often used. We have customers that have both Robot Schedule and Automate. And what we're doing is running batch activity on IBMI and maybe evoking Automate to check like an email box or do some of the things where you need to read a spreadsheet and run, maybe poke some IBMI screens with Telnet to update some values. You can do all kinds of neat things with Automate and a combination of Robot Schedule. Chuck, we should probably tackle many companies are now blocking Java, FTP, etc. Does Robot GUI use Java and FTP to connect to IBMI? So are these products using Java, FTP, kind of to drive home that point? You want to cover that, or you want me to talk about that, guys?
Well, let's both talk to it. So
Okay.
the GUI uses a direct connect back to IBMI, back to our Robot Schedule database. So there are
Using
specific
Java.
ports. Yeah, there are specific ports that are required for the GUI to talk to, back to the database. So that would be important to know that when you do install the graphical interface.
And we have updated it for Log4j. That should be available now. And we do not use FTP in the product to connect to IBMI. So it's all Java and done through open ports, right? Anything else we should add on that, Chuck?
No, we've got installation instructions on our website that you can take advantage of.
Yeah. Then somebody was asking about converting from AJS, IBM AJS, to Robot Schedule. And in the third session, we'll cover this a little bit further, but there is a command in Robot Schedule, RBT AJS conversion. And then there's also a work job schedule entry conversion too, so that we can actually bring those in.
All right, we have a question about green screen versus GUI and monitoring. Yeah, so the GUI interface is equivalent to the green screen setup. And if you've got monitoring set up, for instance, through our Halcyon product for messages or for job ab ends, there's no change if you're using the GUI versus the green screen for Robot Schedule. Everything will work exactly the same in your Halcyon monitoring.
Yeah, I think it's a question of really, do you want to do automatic monitoring or do you want to look at something? If you want to look at something and see the schedule, then the GUI schedule activity monitor kind of allows you to watch the schedule and the batch processing as things run. Whereas with Halcyon or Robot Console or any other tool that might monitor QSysOper, you're really doing that automatically. And it's just running in the background. And you noticed on your job control panels, you can control what message queue you go to for your jobs as they finish. And it doesn't have to go to QSysOper. You could create a special message queue for robot end of job messages.
Yep, and
Okay.
I closed our polling. You'll have opportunities to correctly answer the polling question for follow-up and choose multiple options on Wednesday and Thursday. Otherwise, thank you for joining us. We appreciate your
Yeah, I
time
think
today. I stole
that's it.
Mark's thunder.
Thank you, everyone.
Yeah, yeah. Have a
It's
great rest.
okay. Thanks, everyone.
Have a great rest of your day, and we will see you tomorrow.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
We'll see you tomorrow and Thursday. Bye-bye.